It's 2:50. We're going to get started with the rest of the second half of our afternoon. So our first presenter for this afternoon is Chris Nicolai with Delta Waterfowl. And Chris, I don't have a whole lot to say, so go ahead and introduce yourself for me, okay?
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Cool. I'll go ahead and share my talk here. But oops.
Good.
Yep, but that's the wrong end of the talk. Let me just move this.
There you go. Perfect.
Yep, now I just got to figure out, there we go. Okay, well, hello, everybody. My name's Chris Nicolai. I'm currently the waterfowl scientist for Delta Waterfowl. I'm in Bismarck, North Dakota. I've been here about 14 months. Prior to that, I worked 15 years with the Fish and Wildlife Service and the Migratory Bird Program out in Nevada and California. But happy to be here. I was actually the Nevada chapter at TWS for a year back in, I think, 2012 or so. So, thanks for letting me try to meet some more people here in my new home turf. So a couple of slides here just dealing with history of Delta Waterfowl. So, we've been around a long time, started in the early 1900s. We're involved back in the day. This picture here includes Aldo Leopold. And ever since the beginning of Delta Waterfowl, we've always had a focus on science. We don't want to just take actions without learning about them and doing them as best as possible, and implementing new things that are informed. And then the biggest component of all is training the next generation of wildlife professionals. So all our science, well, I shouldn't say all, but 95% of our science is performed by graduate students and undergrad technicians. So, currently I'm adjunct at 12 universities. I sit on, if we're funding a project, I sit on the students committee and help with the training and getting the products out that we're looking for. And also back up a bit, we receive most of our funding, almost all of our funding, from philanthropists, mostly duck hunters that are interested in questions, and we match up research projects with those questions, and then go out and identify universities to carry out the projects. So our overall goal is to produce ducks and to also secure the future of waterfowl hunting. Now, I'll go into all these components here soon. We have four pillars that we focus on here at Delta. So duck production and the habitat conservation and the R3 program, I should say, are more of our programmatic things. This is going to happen every year. We get donations every year for these programs, and we just keep growing them. But the branch I supervise is the research and education, and we try to form some part of research into all three of these components so that we're always using a science-based approach. So at the duck production, we're pretty much focusing on trapping, nest predator trapping, and then these hen houses. So for the trapping, currently we have 26 trapping contracts where we're paying trappers to trap nest predators in North Dakota. We have them going on in Manitoba and North Dakota. In North Dakota, it's just mammalian predators. But in Manitoba, we're also able to target avian predators as well: ravens, jays, magpies, crows, etc. And then, we're always looking to make our predator removal program better. So I'll cover some of the research that we have going on predators here later. And then the second programmatic part of our operation are these hen houses. They're similar to wood duck boxes where mallards like to nest in these. They figured these out in the 90s, just getting them out of the grass away from nest predators during incubation, but also when she moves the brood to the wetland. As you can see, she can just drop right into the wetland. That's typically one of the most dangerous time periods for ducklings. It could take up to 4 days to get to a wetland, before the ducklings can start feeding. But we're always putting up more. We just had a new program where we're going to be putting a bunch in Wisconsin, and now we're up to 8,800 hen houses. And we have people in all these areas going around and maintaining these from year to year. One of the bigger programs we have is our R3 program. And just get some notes here. So 2020 wasn't kind to us for this. These are all hunt programs where people are meeting face to face. We canceled all our events, and we subsequently ended up losing our R3 coordinator. But help us spread the word. We have it advertised on our website. We're hiring this new R3 coordinator right now. And one of the programs we have, well, this is our biggest one. It's First Hunt, and this is just getting people out hunting for their first time. This could be kids that, Boy Scout groups, family groups, et cetera. All of our local chapters throughout North America put these together. And it's the longest running waterfowl hunting program in the continent. Had over 2,000 events, 8,200 participants. All these green areas is where we've had things. And we want to keep this growing in the future. But we're also collecting science about it as well. So when people sign up for this, we follow up with 3 surveys, pre-hunt survey, post-hunt survey, and then a year to 2 years later to help inform understanding how to recruit hunters. What do we need to do to get more people and keep them buying licenses in the future? And then also when we do this, we follow up with the state agencies for tracking future license sales, just to confirm that these folks are still out there. So hopefully we'll start piling up some data here over the years and help inform, a lot of everybody's recruitment programs. The biggest part we have is the university hunting program. So in 2019, we had 24 participating universities. We have a bunch, mentioned, we have all the surveys, everything like that. We weren't able to do anything in 2020, as we mentioned, but we are planning for this fall, if all things go well, to implement 36 of these hunts. So we'll be growing our program by 50% just this year. And as I mentioned, have all those follow-up surveys. And then we've also taken the time to identify where we want to expand to. There's a lot of potential. We've identified all the universities that have ecology programs and tiered them. The bright red dots are the highest tier that we'll focus on first. But as you can see, there's a lot of potential to grow. This isn't just a handful of universities throughout the continent. There's 494 that have been identified. And then I'll spend the rest of the time on research and education. And as I mentioned, I sit on a lot of these graduate committees, so I don't want to steal results from these students. You'll hear from all these up and comers over time. And so I'm just going to highlight their projects. It's been a lot of fun, get to be involved with a lot of different universities, a lot of projects, help out when I can, but make sure the students are taken care of as needed during their graduate career. So we can break down the research projects that we're working on down into a couple categories here. So radio projects, analyses of long-term data streams. With the waterfowl community, we've got a lot of data sets that are over 60 years old, banding data, aerial surveys, harvest data, license sales, et cetera. And then we have a bunch of field projects. And then we're also following up with our trapping efficiency projects. I'll go into all the projects we have going on right now. So one that's really neat is with the Atlantic Flyway on ringneck ducks. So they ended up making a new harvest strategy for their waterfowl harvest plans that only use population surveys from this polygon in the blue. It's called our Eastern Survey Area, to inform duck harvest in the Atlantic Flyway with 4 species. But we're a little bit interested that ringnecks aren't really abundant in that Eastern Survey Area. So we're interested in knowing where these birds are deriving from. So we've been marking birds for the last 4 years from Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, Virginia. I was in Maryland the last 2 weeks, putting out 30 more radios. And we already completed a master's student in 2020 from the University of Georgia. We've got a new PhD student coming up soon that we're going to have supervised out of Saskatoon. But what's neat here, these dots are color coded from their release site. And what we're interested in is where they are during the aerial duck surveys that are conducted in May. And from these, as you can see, even though we marked all these birds in the Atlantic Flyway, 85% of them aren't even available in that Eastern Survey Area when these surveys are conducted. So, this really helps the Atlantic Flyway guys understand where their ducks are coming from. Another one we're working right now is down in Arkansas with Dr. Doug Osborne. We're supervising 3 graduate students down there. And you can see in this net, other than the one shoveler, we've got mallards, American widgeon, and American green-winged teal. We're putting radios out. They just completed putting out 110 radios last week, and all these have solar panels. A lot of experience I've had out in the West as we can get some of these to work for multiple years, migrations. But we'd really like to help inform frustrated hunters and habitat managers of where the birds are, what time periods are using different habitats, etc. And some of the long-term data sets we've been dealing with specifically are pintails and canvasbacks. Just analyzing these 50-year data sets, for example. Here's one that's gotten a lot of traction just in the last 2-3 weeks while the annual flyway meetings are going on. And just a simple graphic here for pintails. They're a bird that had very high population levels in the 50s and 70s. And then during the droughts of the 80s in the prairies, their populations dropped like all the other ducks. But once water came back on the system, they never responded. So hunters or agencies reduced the daily bag limits on pintails from typically very high full bag limits of pintails to restricted ones, only 4 birds or typically 1 or 2 birds. And here you can just see over time with each one of these different bag limits, we actually did influence the harvest rate on these birds. Hunters actually dropped harvest as far as 50% reduction. So the hunters did their part. But as we start analyzing these long-term data sets, are we seeing much of a change in annual survival from one year to the next? And here's a graphic just showing here with the bigger dots what was going on before we had restrictive regulations, and all these smaller dots correlate with that prior figure of just different bag limits. And as you can see, harvest rate increases along the x-axis, survival rate increases. So when we decrease harvest rates, we hope we have an increase in survival rate. And as you can see in this graphic, these dots move to the left without moving up much. So we're basically, we've got 30 years of data showing we've reduced harvest rate, but we hardly had any influence on survival rate, which suggests harvest rates have not had a very big impact on these pintail populations. So it's something else. So we've been hiring folks to analyze these data. We got Todd Arnold from the University of Minnesota, and then a postdoc, Thomas Reiki, that was at the University of Nevada, Reno, and now has moved on to another postdoc in Switzerland. But what they're really interested in is helping inform some new revisions of adaptive management framework that has been in place for pintails for about 10 years, and a new model that's just been released in the last couple weeks. And we have a lot of concerns with this new balance equation harvest model that's been coming out. Such things as estimating survival in the absence of harvest, and then the use of correction terms on some of these annual variants or variables. We just have a lot of concerns with that. So we've been having these guys address these questions with these long-term data sets with some unique approaches, using IPMs and other approaches to correlate the effects of survival, harvest, and environmental variables. Canvasbacks, we have a PhD student named Mike Johnson at Colorado State University, and then a postdoc, Dan Gibson, as well at CSU, that are using, I think it's about a 35-year data set on canvasbacks and a bunch of environmental variables, bringing in local counts, continental banding data, continental surveys broken down by stratum, and learning more about what's driving these populations. And it's interesting, at a large scale, we're actually seeing an effect on the population dynamics of another diving duck, redhead, that's a nest parasite that can influence and perhaps suppress canvasback populations just due to their parasitism. Working with the Atlantic flyway, so a whole group of states out east, they've been having lower counts on mallards in the Atlantic flyway. So one question we had was, where are these mallards that they're harvesting coming from? So we've got a graduate student, master's student, Sam Kusha from State University of New York under Mike Schumer. He's doing a bunch of stable isotope work where they're pulling feathers during their fall banding and also from their harvest collection survey, looking at the juvenile birds and using stable isotopes with these maps, able to plot where the ducklings in the population are coming from. And over time, we've learned that a higher proportion of the Atlantic flyway mallards are actually coming from Atlantic Canada, suggesting that recruitment of U.S. Atlantic flyway mallards has been decreasing every year. So we'll be following up this likely with another project.
Chris, sorry, you have about 3 minutes left.
Cool. Yeah,
Sorry.
That should be just about perfect.
Okay, good.
And then not last one here, I think there's two more after this. So we got Katrina Terry from Louisiana State University. She's looking at wetlands that are surrounded by croplands. And I'll just speed up here a little bit, but she's using drones to count broods. But one thing that's really neat is she's testing the water samples and looking at invert abundance and relating it to the water samples level of neonicotinoids. This will be a pretty neat result when it comes out. Another one I have going on out in Nevada is a long-term 18-year data set, demographics with mercury samples pulled throughout the whole project. So we're going to start looking at how mercury levels in individuals are traded off to impact survival and recruitment. And some of these predator projects, one, I'll go quicker through this one. I was hoping to expand it a bit, but one method of nest predator removal is to highlight these hot spots that we define as high densities of nests in grassland. And we've got a student that's going to estimate how many birds are in these wetlands. And dealing with that, we have a lot of detection issues. So we're going to use distance sampling, repeated removal components, a cable versus chain, a double observer, a blind observer. And here's just some results, a little bit counter to what some of us nest searchers in the past have thought was happening. For example, we're inflating our numbers by almost 40% by searching the nest secondly within about 10 minutes. And here I heard Trenton just ask a question a few minutes ago. We're trying to figure out how to remove nest predators for these overwater nesting birds. And we haven't had much luck over the years, but Trenton's starting to figure out a few things. And as we mentioned, redheads might be pretty important in the system. Wish we talked about this project a little bit more. And lastly, we actually do have a project where we are studying the predators themselves. So we're entering the third year of a project, putting on GPS collars on raccoons. And we're actually learning that 100% of them are overwintering in abandoned farm buildings. So, that's a component that we might have to address in the future to help figure out these nest predators. And otherwise, this is the end, and just wanting to meet people, and hopefully if folks are interested in some projects, come give me a call at Delta Waterfowl, and we're good at rounding up money, getting some projects going and getting them wrapped up. Thanks for the time.
Thank you, Chris. That was very interesting. And it was amazing to hear about all the research that you guys have going on out there. Very interesting stuff coming up.
Yeah, hopefully I can meet a lot more of you guys.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you being here. And if anybody has questions for Chris, please just send those through chat and we'll move